Hey guys, Smatho 10 here with a special NRL State of Origin Game 3 decider here for the Daily Fantasy Rankings website. Thank you for stopping by and checking out our extensive preview to the matchup. And as you can see on my right-hand side, we have a special guest here for our little preview. C. France, 1990, also known as Corey France. Thank you for joining the show for you tonight. Thanks for making some time with me.
G'day, Smatho. How are you, mate? And yeah, happy to spend a few minutes, few hours, whatever it takes to talk over some footy and get stuck into some Origin.
Oh, this is very rare for us here to talk something more than AFL. As I said, I love my NRL. Bit of a rugby background when I was a youth junior, but tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, mate. Whereabouts you're based, and what got you into the NRL DFS here in Australia?
Yeah, mate. Well, based up here in sunny Brisbane. Still getting over the Broncos' massive win yesterday. That was pretty huge. But how I got stuck in, I don't really know too much, but probably more so loving the old statistics background when I was doing engineering at uni, and somehow the numbers got crunched and got into the whole betting landscape, and then the whole fantasy part come after it when I soon realised that this is probably the way of the future with all betting accounts and whatnot getting here and there. So yeah, just had to go down a different path, and that's the way I went.
So what you're trying to say, you're a professional mug punter? Is that what you're trying to say?
I wish, mate. I wish. It's always a dream.
It's always a dream. We're always trying to make money off sport and dogs and stuff like that. Pretty good. All right. So today, we're going to do a bit of a show in terms of, we've got to preview the big game 3 here on Wednesday night, but we also want to give you guys a bit of a primer, a bit of 101 in NRL DFS. There'll be a lot of guys who've been playing NRL for quite a while. There'll be some guys who'll be looking here on Wednesday night thinking, what's this? Can I get involved? So let's spend this first part of our little preview here just showing the guys here on Moneyball and Draftstars how to actually construct lineups and put teams into these DFS contests. And what I'm going to do to start with here, Corey, is actually going to share my screen here and show you Moneyball and how they use their point system, first of all. It's quite different to Draftstars. Now, I've been a bit more of a Draftstars fanboy, so I've actually been starting to play Moneyball in the last few months. So, mate, you might have to talk me through in terms of some 101 basics in terms of scoring. But essentially what you get here is what we call base stats here in NRL, which is your tackles and your running. And then obviously it's your attacking kind of plays such as tackle breaks, try assists, and actually scoring tries will get you the majority of the points. So talk me through this Moneyball. Obviously tries is the main key feature here, Corey.
Yeah, definitely. Tries, assists, line break and line break assists are definitely the 4 that score a bit more on compared to Draftstars. Scoring wise, there's a few little quirks that are different. Obviously, you score on 40-20s in Moneyball where you don't on Draftstars. You lose points on missed goals on Moneyball, and you don't score points on kicking meters on Moneyball, whereas you do on Draftstars. But yeah, long story short. Seem to sort of benefit a lot of the try scorers, players that are involved in tries, players that are involved in those sort of big plays seem to benefit a bit more, whereas players that are more focused on defence and those base sort of stats seem to reward better on Draftstars.
Yeah. I'll flick over the Draftstars and I'll show you their particular scoring, what the main difference for me is you get half a point for a tackle in Moneyball, whereas you get actually the full point for a tackle itself, less points for a try, but your try assists and your line breaks are around the same, but there's no 40-20 bonuses, there's no, as I said, missed conversions, missed goal kicks and things like that. So I find that Draftstars is a little bit more easy to follow in terms of your Moneyball, but that what kind of separates the two sites apart, essentially.
Definitely.
All right. So, also, we've got our little NRL must-dos when you prepare lineups for a particular contest. These include checking teams before kickoff, and then teams usually come out around 60 minutes for a normal NRL game. being a bit of a showpiece feature on a Wednesday night here. Sometimes you might get that a little bit later. Any team news that you're thinking of at the moment? The first kind of two games didn't really have much team news, but this one is actually quite important for Wednesday night.
Yeah, definitely. Still a lot of water to go under the bridge in terms of what's going to happen. About 48 hours from now. So, really sort of up in the air as to what will exactly happen. A lot of, I thought it was a small concern, but apparently it's quite a big concern as to whether Matt Gillette will play or not. Big news could be that, there's a lot of talk that Ethan Lowe would come in if he did, but then there's also talk that Kirk Capewell might even come in and play if possible. So, and then obviously on the other end of things is David Clemmer obviously came into the side with Tariq Sims being suspended at the start of last week there, and it's sort of up in the air as to what Freddie's going to do with him in terms of will he start him, who will he start for if he does, will it be Paul Vaughan, will it be Saifidi? So yeah, sort of plenty of water to go under the bridge, and definitely if I was putting in some lineups now, there'd probably be a few changes by the time the match starts on Wednesday. So. Yeah,
unfortunately, it's not really a set and forget kind of construction build, unfortunately. So if you're going to put in, say, multiple teams, you really need to have some backup plans if this team news drops. You know, you could predict that Clemmer might get the start. You've got to predict if Matt Gillett, who's under an injury cloud as well, he's going to be pulling out. So you've got to look at the guys that are not actually going to get a game in terms of that particular lineup, Bills. Next question I want to ask you, mate, is actually where do you find your data? Where do you find your stats from? Is there any particular couple of websites that you're like NRL.com or even like say Fox Sports that you kind of look at for data from your last couple of games or even previous series back in the past?
Well, you're asking me to unravel my secrets here, mate.
Just for the mug guy who wants to know, hey, what happened, in the past?
No, to be honest, it's something. It's nothing special. It's there's a few sources I generally look around and follow, but probably the main one's the NRL.com website. They probably have the most comprehensive sort of stats database I've seen in terms of. Like, I don't even cover this sort of stuff, but things like post-contact meters and real intricate sort of stats that probably clubs even use for their own sort of data. So that's probably the best one. I just learned to basically reconfigure that sort of information into my own database and work out roughly how players perform using that information, how teams perform using that information. And over time, something that was, I know, probably very, very small, just kept growing. And then each year I'd sort of do a bit of a review of that in terms of what can I add, what don't I need. There's a lot of stats I was covering in the early days that I don't even bother now. And just through pure just understanding that either it just economically wasn't viable and just wasn't worth it to even really bother looking at that anymore. So basically, yeah, long story short, I'm not doing anything special. I watch a lot of footy. I just record a lot of footy, and I live and breathe it. So it just comes with it, I guess. So.
Very good, very good. Now, also, if you don't have that particular time looking up particular stats from particular slates, both sites do actually, a good job in terms of what has happened in their previous games. So if I share my screen again here, and I'm on the Moneyball site, if I click on James Tedesco here, he actually shows his previous 5 games for State of Origin. So obviously the 2 for this year and the 3 for last year. So that gives you a bit of a snapshot in terms of what he's done for State of Origin. Now, for players such as players playing out of position, like say Tom Trbojevic here, you got to look. He's had a 3-try effort in his last game and a try last year, but you have to think about what position did he play when he only scored 11 points here back on the 24th of June and things like that. So. Just bear that in mind. If you're looking at the form here, like, oh, that's great form, I might pick, Tom. The averages can be a little skew with.
Yeah, you're spot on this, Smatho. It's probably something I probably didn't touch on there, but definitely, knowing where a player played and how many minutes they played, even to the point of like some teams use locks and second rowers very differently and things like that. Having that sort of info and knowing more about how they got that score, why they got the score, can come in very handy. So, just because someone like, let's for example, Cameron Munster scores so well week in, week out, you've got to ask questions like, is he going to do that at fullback, for example? Like they're the sort of questions I guess you got to like sort of question when you see a lot of this data and you go, well, he's averagely scoring this all the time, but yeah, is he how's he scoring that? Knowing that sort of information, and I guess there are places out there that will tell you that, but I think that's also where it helps with me too. I do record that sort of stuff to know that I can sort of break it down to how they go in that certain position rather than looking at it as a whole as such. So.
Yeah, look, the point I'm trying to make here is like Cameron Munster in his last 5 games here for Queensland, he's playing the 6th jersey. Now he's going to be playing at fullback. You know, these run meters, it would be far more than is what he's running it from the halves, but he's not going to get many of those tackles instead. So maybe not much of a problem here on Moneyball. You're going to get half a point, but if you go over to Draftstars, then yeah, you've got a 2-game sample, but you know the run meters will go up, the tackles are going to go down. So yeah,
exactly,
it'll be a very, very interesting game come Wednesday night. All right, cool. Well, let me just set this up for you as we come back to ourselves here. So we're on Wednesday night. It's around an 8 p.m. kickoff. Obviously, the Blues are $1.40 favourites with Queensland at $3. You can get the line around 6.5, which is a quite significant line in NRL. Usually, when you're above 6 points, it's
definitely for Origin.
Definitely for Origin, yes. Both sides have put out 20,000 this morning. Here on Monday. Moneyball did go 15k, and then Draftstar said, no, you can have 20, and then Moneyball immediately reacted and did a $20,000 contest. So let's just talk about what your narratives after this particular game. Obviously, clearly, you know, the bookie's favourite, which means you need to target Blues players, especially attacking players. But being GPPs, sometimes being contrarian is the way to go. So what is your pretty much your narrative for this the game on Wednesday night?
Well, see, you raise a very good point there. Like when you look at both these sides, naturally the Blues players are scoring probably it's probably upwards about 5 to 10% more points for the game, but at the same time they do come at almost about 5 to 10% more in total salary of cost to your team. So you're getting much of a muchness there. So in the end, I think it automatically comes just down to how I think this game's going to go. And it hates me to say it, but as a Queensland supporter, I do believe the Blues have a big edge on us here, and especially in the reserves. Like any of those Blues reserves would probably be starting if they're playing for Queensland. So it's a big, massive there when they come on at that sort of 20 to 30 minute mark and how the Queensland team reacts. So based on that alone, it's very hard for me to be stacking a side with Queensland players, even though definitely if they can turn up and do the unthinkable, well, not so much the unthinkable, but pull something out that no one's really expecting, it's going to be very hard to see a team that's stacked with Blue players end up winning. So definitely, if you do take that risk and go with those Queensland guys, they're gonna be well rewarded. But I think personally for myself, I'm going to be seeing a lot of sides with a lot of Blues players in it. So
yep. In terms of the amount of points scored as well, usually we haven't had many deciders over the years. Usually Queensland are either up 2-0 up or it's it hasn't been many 1-1s. Do you reckon there'll be a lot of points in this game, or do you think things will get really tight defensively?
Well, see, that's a tough thing. Like, nothing would surprise me. But in saying that, I think by the time you get to these decided games, teams have, the coaches and coaching staff have generally worked out how these teams are going, even though there's still new guys coming in and out. And for example, like they're dealing with a Mitchell Pearce that is literally scarred from being beaten that many times in series. But it's a different Mitchell Pearce and things like that. There's still obviously a few unknowns, but generally things should get tighter and tighter because they've worked out that you can't let Damien Cook run, you can't give Cameron Munster space, things like that. And so generally the games do come down to a try or a goal at the end, and it's definitely like the line. I think it's about 34.5 or something, and it's probably about spot on. It's hard to see whether there's any worth going over under there because it could easily blow out if the Blues get hold of Queensland like they did in Game 2. And again, it could just be like a typical old decider and finish 10-8 or something like that. So,
yeah, it's very hard to predict. But I want to give you a bit of a shout out here to your article on the DFR website. If I just bring that up, mate. Comprehensive is a word in the dictionary, and this also you can file that in number 2, Corey Francis fantasy lineup tips on the site. Mate, you've gone through and just whacked it out of the park here. You've got here your head-to-head performances for both Moneyball, which is the green here, and then the Draftstars on your pink there. Then you go down to your cheat sheets for Moneyball and for Queensland as well. That's for Moneyball, and then you keep going, and all of a sudden you've got your plays for Moneyball, then your Draftstars cheat sheets, then your Dreams team. Oh, mate, it just goes on and on. So that's available on the DFR website for all of our viewers here this evening. And obviously it's free to use as well, which is one of the best things about it. Mate, let's break down this game. We'll go through the particular positions between New South Wales and Queensland. And let's start with the backs. Now, obviously in Moneyball, they classify it as OBs, whereas on Draftstars, you need to pick 2 wingers, fullbacks, and a centre. So let's start with Moneyball first. Obviously, the most expensive player on the slate, James Tedesco at 8,700, Cameron Munster at 8,1, and then you've got your wingers at Okar Gagai, who are actually quite expensive considering the amount of points you can get from attacking stats here, Corey. Yeah,
definitely. It's a tough one because, like you said, the 2 most expensive guys there, 2 of the most expensive guys there in those backs in Tedesco and Munster, and it's very hard to shy away from either of them. As for Moneyball, they are the perfect players. Those key stats that I mentioned before that score far better on Moneyball, they're the stats that these guys rack up, and if I'm building a side, I'm almost wanting to fit both of those players in nearly every team, but it's just so hard because even when you try to go light in those other positions, you still find yourself trying to squeeze in that 60,000, and it gets very difficult. That's for sure.
All right, well, let's have a look at a bit of value then. Blake Ferguson, Oates are your 2 wingers, and then you got your centres, Jack, Will Chambers, Morgan, and then you got Moses Mbai, which we can't really recommend playing due to the fact, unless you get an injury to one of these guys, you probably won't be seeing much more than 15, 20 minutes out of him. And then we won't about Gufferson at all unless he gets named in the starting side as well. It's cheap at 4K, and if he gets a start, then brilliant. But we don't see him playing at all. Any of these cheapy guys down here you might want to take a fly at?
Yeah, probably the one that sort of stood out to me was Jack Whiten. I think that sort of price is based on him playing at club level there, and given he's playing in a side that's expected to probably dominate in the backs, just that 5,800 just seems a bit short. And I guess, as much as in saying that, again, if Queensland do have a bit of a decent game, you would expect definitely a player like Morgan, Chambers or Oates to really probably step up there. So as to who it would be and whatnot, that's probably a difficult one. They're probably priced, like I said, we're probably expecting a little bit more points from the Blues players there, but definitely out of that lot there, Whiten's probably the one that stands out a bit more than most, and especially with Josh Adokar on his right too, probably a good chance for him to maybe earn some extra points there as well.
Excellent. All right. let's skip over to Draftstars then. So as I said, you got to choose 3 players out of this pool. Usually my lineup builds, I usually click the centre first and see if there's any actually centre players that are actually just that particular position itself, because we tend to find those guys lower owned. But unfortunately, there's only Will Chambers on his own for this particular contest. And, geez, you have to pull something out of the bag if we get him. I know, you know, at 7,830, you really want a bit of a ceiling game for him at loan ownership if you're going to pick him. So can't really recommend him there. Corey, what do you reckon?
No, you're spot on. A bit like me, you could probably do the trip over to Europe for a bit, because he's certainly not the player he used to be, that's for sure. But in terms of that lot, in terms of centres, it was probably one of the hardest ones I found on Draftstars this time. Like, a lot of them all seem about spot on. Like, I don't really like taking such a large price for a centre, but it's hard to go away from Tommy Turbo in this situation. Like, and then that's like exclusive of the fact that he scored 3 tries in the last game. He really is becoming like that sort of dynamic player that every club could really do with right now. He's so tall, he's so agile, he's so long, he's just so good at scoring tries. He's just that person you want in your team, and I know he's in the centres and that sort of sucks. I'd rather him probably at the back, but obviously Tedesco's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very hard to shy away from having him in your team. And to be honest, in this situation, it's probably a position I'd rather pick last almost and feel forced to pick someone outside of not including Mbai in that list. But I'd rather, definitely probably put a lot more attention towards other positions. And if I'm forced to have to select a Chambers or a Morgan, sometimes it's better to just go with that and rather let the gods make your decision rather than you be forced to make that decision. So,
yeah. As probably as a rookie user here, I'll be looking, Tom Trbojevic, good form, Dan Gagai is cheap, I might click him. Just remember, Gagai only had 23, 24 points his last game because obviously the ball didn't get his way, whereas Jack really had a great game last matchup. So just make sure you click on those particular game logs in there. But if you had to rank them, you'd probably go 1, 2, 3, 4 in that particular order. So, but if you have the cash for Tom, get him in the centres instead of the wingers and fullbacks. All right. Let's go over here to wingers and fullbacks, and obviously we've got some 2 high salary blokes in James Tedesco and Cameron Munster. As we talked about, Munster's probably going to get a lot more running meters at the back, but less tackles. But I can see him paying off that salary pretty well, unless a lot of tries go over his head. That means you lose points for tackle breaks and missed tackles. So you also got here Corey Norman, who plays in the 6 as a winger fullback, and then obviously your cheapest guys here are your wingers who, they may see some more action. You just don't know at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because like you put Oates, Gagai and Ferguson, probably 3 of the biggest try scorers in the NRL. In most teams, they're definitely not at the bottom of the list; they're towards the top. So it's another one of those ones where you could field about 10 different lineups and put 10 different winger fullback combinations in there, and certainly not look out of place. But yeah, you raise a good point with Norman there. It's if you do honestly think that the halves are going to be top scorers, and it's definitely an option to be including in that winger fullback position. And again, I feel like he's sort of been ignored a bit heading into this series. Usually when new halves come into these sort of games, you hear about articles about how this team's going to shut him down and they're going to target him and things like that. But I haven't really heard too much about Norman so far. So whether New South Wales do or not, I don't know. But I know he can be a scary player at times. So, it'd be interesting to see what happens there.
Interesting to see what happens, yeah. If you go into that narrative of New South Wales, then you must have probably 2 of these guys in your winger fullbacks. I wouldn't be mucking around choosing a Norman and a Oates if you think New South Wales is going to win. That's probably the wrong strategy to go about.
No, definitely not an Oates. But you're spot on. You need a miracle to not be picking New South Wales players and but expecting them to win and still winning on your lineup.
All right, let's just jump back over to Moneyball. Let's talk about the halves. So we've got 4 to choose from here, and they're all, nicely priced here as well, with Corey Norman at 5.7 and Mitchell Pearce at 6.5. Do you reckon Pearce will be doing more of the kicking duties in general play, or you'll leave that up to James Maloney, who's a little bit more at 6.9?
I do think Pearce is definitely the better option here. Obviously, Maloney did probably score a bit higher than he does at Penrith in terms of that game too, but I think if I'm going to pick one of those two, I do go with Pearce there, because I do believe he's probably a bit more grounded. But then again, we're talking about the Moneyball format here, so obviously he doesn't get points for kick meters, so he's obviously looking for things like line break assists and scoring points in those sort of areas. So it's a tough one. Again, between the all 4 as a whole, it's sort of hard to pick one that's like shouts out as value over the others. But I think it's definitely a position where you're going to go like a long way to definitely making the money and definitely a long way to winning as well.
Okay. Let's jump over to Draftstars then. You got more of a selection here. So Michael Morgan makes here, Ben Hunt, who plays at dummy half, and obviously Cameron Munster here as well. So this is going to be a bit more wide open in terms of ownership, and the salaries kind of reflect where we're at here. Ben Hunt at 14.1. I mean, he's been done admirably well at the half. A lot of tackles, but a lot of missed tackles as well. I mean, just the 1 try assist here. Not many kick meters. I don't think he did much kick. There's a stack there. So he's kicking more of the ball out of dummy half. And with Corey Norman the side, I reckon they'll continue. Daly Cherry Evans is pretty much the elite play on Draftstars. Just a little bit cheaper than these two guys. He's going to have the ball a lot. I reckon he's my number 1 pick if I'm making a side.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. The only exception to that is, I guess, if you do have that narrative that it is going to be like an old-fashioned decider and it's going to be very low scoring and defensive, then your players like Hunts and Cooks may rack up an absolute bill of tackles. And if you do want Cook in the hooker, it might be an option to go with Hunt in the half there. But definitely outside of that, you can't go past 12.9 for Cherry Evans, and like you said there, he's likely to dominate the kicking. Norman will play that second fiddle role, and Hunt will still kick, but Daly will still probably rack up 300 plus. So.
Yep. Now, I have a bit of bias against James Maloney, unfortunately. You probably read in my articles that I don't really rate the guy that much, because he always just seems to miss tackles, have errors, blow up. But then all of a sudden he has a really good fantasy scoring games where he can just set up lots of tries. Doesn't mind a run as well. Doesn't mind a try as well. So will you be kicking for goal as well? I would assume so.
As in him kicking for goal?
Yeah, kicking for conversions. Yep.
Oh.
There they go. 5 goals versus Queensland there, because obviously Cleary was cooked.
Yeah.
So, if you score 4 or 5 tries, there's an easy 10 points there straight away. So, yeah.
Especially with no Latrell in the team either. So I guess, Maloney's, I'd say 90% likely that he would. But I completely agree with you. He's the James Harden of NRL. Like he seems to score well, but his missed tackles are ridiculous. I think he leads the comp easily. And, I'm the same when it comes to that opinion. Don't get me wrong, he's a great Origin player, and he goes a bit underrated in terms of how talented he is, and wherever he goes, he seems to have a lot of success. But personally, I don't think he's a great fantasy player to be putting in your team. That's for sure.
No. don't be surprised if you're on -4 after 10 minutes and you just be tilting.
Exactly.
All right, let's have a look here. Let me just move these guys over here. Let's look at the hooker. Obviously, 2 of the elite plays for Moneyball and for Draftstars. You only got the 2 choices here. Damien Cook at 8.3 and Ben Hunt 6.4. And if we look over here on Draftstars, we've got Moses Mbai, but we are ignoring him. So 16.9. This is probably the highest Origin Draftstar salary that we've had for a long time. And then Ben Hunt's at 14.120. So, you've got to make a choice of one of these two. This is not exactly plug in an $8,000 hooker and your beauty, move on. You've got to make it a stand here. Are we putting all our chips in Cook, or are we spreading them around for Hunt?
It's a tough one. Like I said, with the whole Draftstarz thing, if you do want to obviously go Hunt in the halves, you've got that option of playing both if you can afford them. But Moneyball-wise, it's definitely... I feel like with that whole scoring system, it's sort of a bit more safer actually to go with Cook though, because it's hard to see that Hunt will get that opportunity to crack that sort of Blues defence. Whereas I feel like Cook will have those opportunities when the tide forwards towards the end of those first and second halves, and he'll definitely be looking to draw those little line breaks and then have Teddy or Trebojevic on his shoulder ready to go. So I feel like there's a bit more potential of a ceiling with Cook, whereas Hunt, I feel like on the Moneyball format is pretty flat. Like he's not gonna break records, I don't think. But yeah.
Well, if you look at last year's performance, where he was in the halves compared to where now he's at dummy half, it's a pretty safe player at that particular salary. If he's
definitely is, yeah.
Just a few missed tackles here, which is in the Maloney range. But as I said, there's not many try assist tackle breaks compared to when he was in the half. So yeah, you're sacrificing points here for your safe floor points there. So I mean, he's fine to play if you need the salary to fit in your Teddies and your Munsters and that. No issues in there, but yeah, if your Teddies and your Munsters don't go off and Ben Hunt's only giving you 30, 40 points, you might be sunk before you even know it.
You're right. It's a 1.9k difference. So at the end of the day, it could be a pure case of can you afford Cook? If you can't, can you afford Hunt? Yes, you can. So you got to go in. But either way, you couldn't in terms of both of the formats there, I'm probably putting in quite a few teams and definitely I'd say there's going to be an almost probably 70 to 30, 60 to 40 split in most of those on those lineups in terms of those two guys. So it definitely won't be chips in on either one, but probably will on Moneyball be focusing a bit more on Cook if I can.
Okay, very good. All right, let's move the forwards. Now, forwards is going to make you break your sides here because you need to put a bit of time in, and hopefully, Corey, you'll be able to help our viewers out this evening. It's about minutes. It's like the NBA. If you guys are on the pond, they're not scoring. And with the rotations now that between Queensland and New South Wales, especially in Game 2 for New South Wales, we had 4 forwards on the pine. And it was a bit of a hard time trying to figure out who's going to be on the pine and who's not. And we had HIAs going on and Wade Graham playing at 6. It's almost like you just got to throw them up in the air and see what lands on the chips and see how you go. But give us some hot tips here, because as you can see on Moneyball, the prices are very similar. Ranging from we've got some low end high 4s all the way just to the 6s. Anything that just kind of stands out, thinking, yep, minutes. Got a roll, it's going to score well. Yeah,
well, you hit the nail on the head there with the Game 2 and how all over the shop that was. I've probably spent a good hour today just going over the Blues minutes and trying to work out roughly what each player is going to do, and especially even with the 4 bench guys, like obviously I've taken into calculation that it's still hard to know whether Clemmer or who will actually start in that role. So that's tough enough as it is. But when you got players like Fanuc and Murray and Graham all coming off the bench, and they all played various minutes and quite like contrasting compared from game 1 to game 2 and the ones that played both. It's so hard to work out what's going on. But in terms of that whole list there, probably the one that sort of stands out to me if he does actually start is Clemmer at just 6.1. Seems a bit short. Like he's probably the pack leader in terms of front rowers in this game. He seems to be leaps and bounds above the rest of them. But then again, from the Queensland side, if you've got a side that's quite young in terms of their forward pack and well, not so much young but inexperienced, with like Blasby, Welch, Offengowie, and who else have we got? Josh Papali. To me, it might be an opportunity for someone like an Offengowie to maybe step up and potentially play more minutes and also put in a bit more time. So at just 5.2, yes, he hasn't done too much, but like if he gets given that opportunity, he's racked up some scores from Brisbane in the past. He's got a few 60s there, so that's Draftstars, but
yep.
Definitely some still high scores there from Moneyball as well. So he's definitely capable of it on his day.
Now, if Matt Gillett is ruled out, there's 80 minutes potentially going to Ethan Lowe. Does he become an automatic play, or you only get 40, 50 minutes and just do a rotation between Glasby, Welch, and Fafita?
Yeah, it was the interesting one I thought, because obviously there's talk about obviously Gillette being out, but it was sort of what does happen in that situation. To be honest, I'm not sure who would start out of Fafita or Lowe. I have a feeling Fafita would still come off the bench. I feel like it's just something they want to do there. So it probably would mean Lowe would start. Would he play 80? Sort of a difficult one. I feel like maybe it would be more restricted to something like a 60, 65 sort of minute game where he comes off just after half time, comes back on with 15, 20 to go, something like that. Definitely if that is the case and he's starting, he's probably close enough to a lock in most lineups because of that. But just based on that salary alone and trying to obviously cover, being able to afford the guys that we mentioned before, like your Munsters and Tedesco. So, if he's definitely starting, he's just about a lock in both formats there.
Yep. Now, like Game 2 here in Draftstars, I've clicked on the second rower forward tab here, and you've got a vast selection of players that can be selected, and you can only select 2. So, again, I look at players that have only got that position only, which means there could be a low ownership instead of plugging in guys who could play front row forward. Obviously, you've got Ethan Lowe down here at 7.5. If he gets the Guernsey, he could be a little bit of a chalky play in terms of salary relief. Joe Offengowie down here for Fafita. Like any of those salaries, ball corner at 9.9 probably sticks out being under 10,000. He'll probably get 65 plus minutes. Cameron Murray didn't do much last game. No, he didn't. So he might scare a few off. But yeah, I think Clemmer, regardless if he starts or not, it's going to be a nice play here on Draftstars.
Yeah, definitely. You're spot on about Clemmer there. If he does start, he's always got to go in. Whether you put him in your front row or second row depends on obviously what sort of arrangement you have with the remaining 3 positions between the 2 spots there. Again, if Lowe obviously starts, he almost comes in certainly there. Also too, like Kafusi and Gillette have both been sort of playing 80, so it's sort of almost a guarantee that Kafusi plays 80 regardless. So as an excellent edge player who can really turn it up on his day, if you think that Queensland are going to roll the Blues come Wednesday, then he at 11.2 he's probably not bad there. But then also he's quite tireless in defence too, so he works hard and might rack up some tackles if they are on the back foot all night. Josh Maguire, sort of a tough one. Like I have him playing probably about 60 minutes, but it's sort of hard to know that, say, if Gillette was out, does Maguire play a bit more of a bit more game time, playing a bit more of a back row, and they bring someone like Glasby into the lock position potentially. So if that was the case, then he could be a bit of value. Jake's a bit of an interesting one. He doesn't scream out to me, but then again, in the past, he's perennially a great scorer. So just his recent club form sort of scared me away recently. But and also too, having such a deep sort of back row bench there with Graham, Finucane and Murray, it's sort of hard to know whether he gets used in that sort of rotation or he gets used in the prop rotation with Vaughan, Clemmer and Saifidi. So sort of hard to know there. But Cordner's sort of, definitely one that sort of stands out on the fringe there, that the Blues will look to use him at the line and things like that. Also too, being game 3, he's the captain of their side. He wants to finally win that back-to-back series, and I think he probably will be looking to really step it up a notch and put on a solid performance. I guess something similar to like he did for the Roosters in the grand final there. It's probably a smoky off the bench if he gets a bit of time. Someone like Wade Graham, obviously he played plenty more minutes because of the whole issue with the injuries in the last game, but it's not to say that he is generally a heavy minute bench player anyway when he has in the past. So he still may even come on early in the second half and play out in the first half and play out the whole game. So at just 8.1, if you really need something cheap in that position, he's a potential option there as well.
Yep. Just quickly, we'll touch back here on Moneyball. In terms of lineup construction, I think the theme that I've been running with this year, especially for State of Origin, is to don't go overboard in terms of your forward spending. Make sure you save some salary for your outside backs. So if you can get 3 of your top guys in here in a lineup with some cheap forwards, that's great. Spend up for your hooker if you can, and then in your half, rock, paper, scissors for that particular one. As for draft stars, again, I tend to look for cheapy guys who are going to get minutes, like Joe O, possibly, maybe in Paul Vaughan. I wouldn't be clicking these 2 guys here straight up and then going your second row and then finding some good minute plays. Half, again, you got to make a stand. Is Queensland going to win? If New South Wales going to win? And then if you got the money for the wingers and fours, jam them in. All right, let's stop sharing the screen and come back to here. I want to talk about, finally, while the rest of this particular video with us, what's your tip, mate? And your out there prediction. Obviously, you scan the markets for all these elite plays that you look at. Is there anything that's taken your fancy this far out from kickoff?
Yeah, well, again, we're taking into effect that Clemmer does potentially start this game. Now, if that is the case, there's a few, obviously, man of the match markets around there, and I feel like he's probably got a point to prove after basically being overlooked for that for the game 3. Whether it was always a tactical long, we'll never know. But if he was actually overlooked, and he's basically come out and said he's a bit frustrated about it, and rightfully so. He's an impressive player, and if that is the case, he's going to want to go out there and take it out on the Maroons in part, and so that there's a good chance he may rack up ridiculous amount of meters, may really break open that Queensland defence, and at I think he was 30s, 40s almost in some places, of potentially being a huge option for man of the match there. Obviously, the normal options are your halves and your fullbacks like your Tedesco's, Cherry Evans, and all those sort of guys that are at the pointy end of the market. But I don't know, something at a smoky. I think he's not a bad price there, at $34 there on Sportsbet anyway.
Now, we ran a poll on the Danny Fantasy Rankings Twitter account today asking who was going to win the particular match and how much. And obviously New South Wales 1-12 was the most popular pick on Twitter today. So I think the Dragons onto that as well. Now, before we wrap up the show here, and everyone's going to read your preview up probably 4 to 5 times, just talk me through your little projection sheets here, little cheat sheets in terms of little draft stars. It's color-coded for your convenience, as they say. Quickly talk us through how you come about these cheat sheets and how can we use these for Wednesday.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, basically with that cheat sheet there, obviously it's all derived from the database I do there. Obviously, I've got to change a few things here and there each week too with injuries and concerns and things like that. Like someone like Gillette might be a bit discounted because of a concern. Even if he does play, is he going to play to his potential? Probably not. So basically that first column on the left there is a projected score based on that format of either being Draftstars or Moneyball. The next column obviously is a breakdown of that score. Their salary value divided by that score. Yep. And that's how you get those sort of, obviously the lower value, the more value there are. So someone like Mbai, we really don't know how many minutes he'll play, whether he'll even play much at all. Obviously, it's sort of almost a no-pick situation there. Then from left to right, you've got their 5 most recent scores, irrespective of position, team, whatever. That's just their 5 most recent scores.
Yep.
So definitely can help if you're unsure as to how that player's been going recently. Obviously, it's in no decimals, but there's obviously give or take. That's roughly about the score they would have scored. Then you go into the basically their average scoring. So sometimes the average can be very similar to a projected score, but then sometimes it can be completely off, depending on what positions they've been playing and things like that.
Yeah,
then their average scoring for 2019. So like the average score.
Yeah, so Jack Travojevic here. You know, you got a lower projection here in terms of what he's been scoring this year. But this is Origin footy where you got your high rotation of forwards. So if you're thinking, okay, why is that different? It's different for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. And like even looking down at, like, for example, Munster down there, you can also see there too that he's scoring that in the halves, but you can also see that he's doing a lot better in 2019 there as well. So he's obviously stepped up a bit. Then the next 2 columns there are basically their floor and their ceiling. So the lowest score there. So pretty sure it was a few weeks ago there that Oatsy put in that -4. And then you can see that some of the guys there have pulled out absolute blinders over the times, and you can probably remember a few of those Tedesco huge scores that he's put in there. And so basically, you can see what sort of guys. There's obviously the guys there like Saifidi. I can't even remember when he would have got that 58, but like if you got a ceiling of 58, you're over the span of quite a big database. It's generally not that much of a good scorer. Then you've got their average and their 2019 average in that position. So as you can see there, like Munster, for example, hasn't played at fullback in 2019.
Yep.
Nor has Finucane played off the bench in 2019. So things like that, obviously, you can sort of break down as to how well they go in that position compared to how well they go normally. Then you've got their averages either at home or away. So, for example, the Blues is at home because they're playing it in Sydney.
Yep.
And Queensland, it's how they go away there. Then you've got how they've gone basically against each other in the past there. So, for example, Tommy missed game 1, coming out and had a blinder in game 2, and he's got an average of 68.8 for 2019 versus the Maroons. Cook obviously ever consistent, scores quite well over that period. Trying to look for an example. Yeah, so some, like for example, there like Norman Welch and Mitchell Pearce both don't have any stats there. Pearce obviously does have form against the Maroons, but the database just doesn't go back that far at the moment. So.
Yeah, excellent. All right, we might wrap things up very shortly here, Corey, as I take away. Any final thoughts on State of Origin 3? Any sneakies that you want to keep it out for, especially for our little single game or single bullet guys? You know, be safe or just go out on a limb?
To be honest, I'm always looking for that one person that fully stands out like they do, and there's no one really there. But in terms of your lineups, I feel like probably especially in that wing sort of centre range too, you sort of want to maybe get the players right. So if you are going with your Ferguson, you might want to match him up with Tommy. So, and likewise, if you're going with White, you probably want to match him up with that Carr. Things like that. It's sort of hard to give away a massive pointer without sort of pointing out the obvious. But yeah, there's no real player that sort of stands out, which is like, for example, with like Friday's Dragons Storm game, there were a few there that were just amazingly like, wow. I think I built a side at one stage and still had 10,000 salary left. It was just like, what's going on here? But yeah, no, come Wednesday, I think it'll be a good game, but the Blues should get over the line, as much as it hurts me to say it. And but I think it will be tight for most of the match. And I feel like Queensland will definitely turn up a lot more than what they did in Game 2.
Now, if anyone wants to reach out and ask questions between now and the game on Wednesday, how can we find you, Corey? What's your Twitter handle? Yeah,
jump on Twitter and get hold of me there. CFrance90, I think it is, 1990 or 90, either one. I always forget it, but jump on there. You'll certainly track me down, and feel free to give me a fair bit of abuse if I've steered you in the wrong direction there, and Saifidi comes out and puts in a blinder.
Yeah,
but no, I've certainly been wrong plenty of times before, so wouldn't be a first.
Wouldn't be the first. No, I've been wrong so many times at my levels as well. So, mate, thanks for spending the time this evening, giving us your thoughts on the State of Origin slate here for Wednesday night. Thanks again, mate, and hopefully we'll see you on the top of the leaderboards. Yeah, no worries, mate. It'd be good to claim some of that 20,000, and good luck on Wednesday. Thanks, mate. Cheers for that. Thanks, Corey. Thanks for viewers. Catch you soon. Cheers.